Thank you, Robert. It's great to be back at Heritage, and I think back to those days, not just in 1995, but also when I was on the Ways and Means Committee back in the House, and I can't think of anybody that lent more to the discussion from off the Hill and contributed more to moving welfare in a positive direction that we have seen evidence of now over the past several years than Robert Rector. And so while I didn't always agree with Robert, and I think that's that probably nobody in this room can say we always agree with Robert, but I don't always agree with Robert. He comes from a very principled position, very well thought out approach, and really did get us to do some things, made us look at things differently and try new things, and they have been incredibly successful. And that's a great thing for the government, but obviously, much more importantly, it's a great thing for millions of women and children in our society. And so you are, whether they know it or not, they owe you a great debt of gratitude for the visionary work that you've done in this area, and you're to be congratulated. So you can applaud. I was asked to come here and talk about marriage, and I titled the topic of my speech as "The Necessity of Marriage." And I spoke here several years ago and gave a talk about the necessity of truth. And so when I decided to come back and talk, I decided we should name this "The Necessity of Marriage," because I see that as sort of a follow-on, that marriage is one of those truths that we articulated that is important for the foundation of any healthy society. And as I started thinking about this talk and how I was going to approach it, I really thought about it in two different ways. One was the necessity from the standpoint of a utilitarian point of view. Why is marriage a good thing for our society? And later on in my talk, I'm going to list, and I've got 3 pages worth of statistics, some of them I've gotten from Robert's work, that sort of outlines why marriage is a good thing and why, from a public policy point of view, just separate all of the philosophical, theological, any sort of higher plane of thinking as to why this is a good, why this is a needed on that level, and just look at it purely from the standpoint of objective utility. And from that standpoint, it's overwhelming. But I think there is another argument that I think we have to become familiar with. The remarkable thing is, when I talk to my colleagues about marriage, and I talk to them about these objective criterion that are clear, evidence that's clear as to why marriage is a good thing, it's remarkable how little of that information my colleagues know. You talk to them about marriage, and you say, marriage is a good thing, and as you know, marriage is under assault and debate here in the Congress these days, and they all sort of have this notion that, yeah, it's a good thing. But it's almost one of those things that's so accepted and so sort of natural that we really don't step back and think, well, why is this such a good thing? Why is it so important? Why is marriage so foundational? And what I'm going to do is just spend a few minutes, because my time is compressed here because of the vote, and I'm just going to spend a few minutes and talk about, first off, the culture in which we live in, and why marriage is an institution that is very much countercultural from the popular culture. In its essence, marriage is a selfless act, is the act of giving oneself to somebody else, becoming one. But you can't become one if you remain separate. And so the idea of unifying in marriage is the act of selflessly giving up a part of you. Some would suggest all of you, but at least a part of you, in this act of becoming one unit, of which, by the way, the family is built upon. So we have the basic essence of marriage is selflessness in a society which is completely selfish. The popular culture is, from every aspect, whether it's the entertainment industry and what they throw at our society, or whether it's our university community and what they throw at our society, and whether it's just the general popular culture, it is a society that focuses on me, on selfishness, I was talking to John Ensign earlier today, and I told him I was going to have talk about marriage and talk about the selflessness of marriage. He said, yeah, he said, I remember when I was a youngster growing up, and I had in my car a picture, one of those stickers that had a bear scratching itself on the tree. And under it says, if it feels good, do it. And that was the motto of the 60s and the 70s, and certainly the motto today. If it feels good, do it. Nike, just do it. If it feels good. The image of a bear scratching the tree just sort of hit me with, we are just animals. We're just animals, that we just do things that at this base level that is pleasing to us at the moment, without the long-term consequences of our actions. And such is the culture today. And so when you say, well, marriage is in trouble, and you say, well, of course it's in trouble. Look at the society in which it exists in. It's an institution which talks about selflessness in a society that focuses purely on self. I mentioned universities and popular culture, and obviously the one that we consider here the most is public policy. And look at the public policy debate that now has grasped marriage. What is it? Our courts and the right to privacy. It's a unique right in our Constitution, which obviously is not in our Constitution. It's been created and found by some people in the Constitution. It's one of the few rights, I would maybe the only right, that is purely a selfish right. It's the right to privacy. It's the right about me. It's a me right for the purpose of me, not for a greater purpose. I gave a speech a few months ago at the Constitution Center in Philadelphia. Those of you who have not been to the Constitution Philadelphia Center, it's wonderful. Go see it. I have to do a little plug for Pennsylvania. But I was required to give a talk on part of the preamble to the Constitution, and the talk broke out the different aspects of the preamble. And the preamble talks about five things that is the reason why we wrote this Constitution. And those five things were to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and ensure secure liberties for ourselves and our posterity. I had promote the general welfare. And when I looked at that, I realized that my little phrase was fundamentally different than all the other phrases in the preamble. Because the other ones had verbs in which the responsibility of that action, of that cause, was the government's. Establish government, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, secure liberties. But the government's job when it came to the general welfare was to promote the general welfare, the common good. And so all the rights in the Constitution, which are individually based rights, according to our founders, were not there for the individual's gain. But the reason we established those rights was for the common good. Well, the right to privacy is not the right to a common good. It's a me-centered right that obviously started in the sexual revolution with contraception and obviously quickly evolved to abortion, and now has found its way into the marriage debate. And all those acts that were self-giving acts, self-sacrificing acts, have been polluted by this right to privacy. The reason marriage is important is because it affirms what our founders understood, that the purpose for this country is not about self. It's about doing things for others for the promotion of the common good, especially in the area of marriage, because it is giving of oneself to another. But there's even a greater purpose than that, and that is so foundational, which is the building of families. Those of you who have children know that every day goes by, it is about selfless acts in raising children, in nurturing children. It's not, if you're a parent that it's all about you, God help your children. It can't be about you. That's why marriage is in trouble. That's why divorce rates are high. Because our society doesn't affirm marriage on any level, legal, societal, on any level. And so it is important for at least those in the public arena, leaders in this country, to know why marriage is important and to be able to articulate it in a way that makes sense on some foundational level to the American public. But unfortunately, most, I would argue, don't understand that, haven't taken the time. I think they understand it here, somewhere deep in here, but they haven't thought about it here. Now let's move to the utilitarian argument as my time runs down. When Max Baucus commented that we needed to remove this money from marriage because, marriage is for some people and it's not for other, and who's government to tell people as to, whether they should get married or not, or whether we should encourage this, it's got its pluses and minuses and, all that kind of stuff. Well, let me just be honest with you. It sure, on an individual case-by-case basis, I guess you could say, marriages has its pluses and minuses. But if you look at it as a whole, there is no question, for a society, for the common good, marriage is a good. Children living with two parents are 44% likely to be physically abused. 44% less likely. 47% less likely to suffer physical neglect. 43% likely to suffer emotional neglect. 55% less likely to suffer from some form of child abuse than living with a single parent. And it's an objective criteria, right? Objective evidence that children living in marriage are better off than those not. Children living with two married parents through age 16 have higher grades, higher college aspirations, better attendance records than children in one-parent families who experience those who experience family disruption. They are also half as likely to drop out of high school. So, from a public safety point of view, from a personal safety point of view, whether it's physical, emotional neglect, whether it's education, children do better. Children in two-parent families are less than half as likely as children in single-parent families to have emotional or behavioral problems. Children who live with both biological or adoptive parents are about a third less as likely as those living with single parents to use illegal drugs, tobacco, or alcohol. Boys raised with two parents are about half as likely to commit a crime, leading to incarceration by their early 30s. So on every level, just ignore everything I said before this. Children do better. So we should encourage marriage. Why? Because children do better. Women. Wives are 30% more likely to rate their health excellent or good than single women of the same age. Married women and men are less likely to suffer long-term chronic illness or disabilities than non-married people of the same age. Mortality rates are less than one-third as high among married women as among non-married women. Women gain more financially from marriage than men do. Marriage increases income by 50% for women, 25% for men. But in both cases, it's better financially. Women are less likely to be victims of intimate partner violence than divorced or separated or never married women. The rate per thousand for divorced or separated women is 31.9, never married women 11.3, married women just 2.6. For women, we've had a whole generation of a movement that has somehow told women that marriage is not necessarily a positive thing for them on multiple levels of their lives. The evidence just doesn't support that. Men. Single men have almost 6 times the probability of being incarcerated as married men. Men who live with their biological children are more involved in the community, in service organizations, more connected to their own siblings, adult children, and aging parents. And they invest more hours per week in work and in careers than non-fathers and fathers of adult children. Married men make more money, as I said, 25% more. And two-parent families are 5 times less likely to be in poverty than single-parent families. Mortality rates are 2/3 as high among married men as among non-married men. Married men and women are less than half as likely as their divorced counterparts to attempt suicide. It's overwhelming. We need marriage in this society if this is going to be a healthier society. And so the public policy implications are clear. We should be promoting marriage. It is a great societal benefit. And the President understands that. That's why he's moved forward with his marriage proposal. That's why he is moving forward with, well, at least some of us are moving forward. Hopefully he will move forward at some point with a marriage amendment to the Constitution. Yes, marriage is under strain because of divorce, because of the culture. We don't need to further destroy it by corrupting marriage to mean anything other than what it is traditionally. And so I would just close and be happy to take your questions and saying, on both levels that I talked about today, we need marriage. And just as importantly, we need people out there talking about why marriage is so important. Thank you very much. Questions? Yes.
About a week ago, two homosexuals who were quote-unquote married in Canada tried to come to the United States to get a visa as married, and they were denied entrance because they are not really married, and our law does not recognize that. Their lawyer is now pursuing an opportunity to sue the United States government as well as Canada's under treaty provisions. What do you see coming out of this?
Well, this is the concern that many of us have had with respect to decisions in the states. There are two decisions pending, New Jersey and Massachusetts, with respect to a constitutional right for people of the same sex to be married. Obviously, Canada has moved forward with that constitutional right created by a court. And the issue internal to the country is the full faith and credit clause of the Constitution and whether one state has to respect the laws of other states. And that's the reason why many of us believe that the federal statute, which is DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, will be ineffective in blocking a constitutional right established in another state, particularly if it's derived from the United States Constitution. And so to, in a sense, trump a constitutional right, you need a constitutional amendment. And that may turn out to be the case. I mean, we see our justices now looking internationally for virtually everything under the sun as to how to interpret our Constitution, which is, I just can imagine Madison just flipping in his grave, thinking that we're going to look at England and France to determine how we interpret our Constitution. But that is an increasing concern. Whether that will trigger a debate on the marriage amendment, I think most of us believe that we have to sort of wait and see what the states do, and if they are going to follow the Texas decision with an expansion of marriage. If that's the case, I think we need to quickly act. Some suggest we have to wait to the Supreme Court. I would argue that that would be too late. Once a right is established, it's very hard to, quote, take away someone's rights. I think we need to act preemptively, and also, the culture is changing moment by moment, minute by minute, as the popular culture affirms marriage or relationships outside the traditional relationships that I spoke of today.
Given the high rates of domestic violence among TANF recipients, I think it's about half to two-thirds. Many women who don't marry because of violence or divorce because of the violence within the marriage. Would you support domestic violence protections within the marriage promotion language in TANF?
I guess I don't know the answer to that because I haven't really studied what particularly you're asking me to do. So I'd be happy to think about that.
Address domestic violence or make individual programs address
I don't think I'd have a problem with that. I mean, obviously it is a problem. What we're trying to accomplish with the marriage promotion, if you will, is not that we're going to go out and say you need to get married, or you know, this is if you have a relationship with somebody, you should get married. What we're trying to talk to people is, number one, just provide some education. I would suggest that the vast majority of young women who are most likely to be in poverty in our society have no idea of the benefits of marriage. Many come from communities in which marriage is not a norm. Many come from communities where there are no healthy marriages as a role model or an example. And that makes it very difficult for them to understand how this cultural institution, which is absent in their life, somehow can benefit them. And so one of the most important parts of the President's program is simply to share information like this, to say, you know, this is an inherent good on a very practical level. And also to help counsel. Part of it is, yes, to help counsel people who are potentially in relationships. A lot of times when people present themselves to the welfare office, if they're expecting a child, or if they just had a child, the father's still in the picture. And so there's an opportunity potentially for some counseling for both to be able to have a more stable relationship. But you're talking about, in many cases, a subculture in which marriage is absent. And it's important to introduce it in some form. And I would argue the best way to do that is through the nonprofit organizations who are in those communities already, who understand the value of marriage, who can model marriage as something that's a good, and provide the support to sustain it. Yeah. That would be you.
Sorry, I had to wait for the microphone. If our answer to single women for financial stability and welfare is to get married, or that marriage will help them out, what do we tell single gay women? Isn't that kind of painting like a bleak future for them?
Well, what I would say is that marriage is a healthy relationship for a man and woman to be involved in, to have children. And that is shown by the evidence. If someone is not not involved in a relationship and where children are a possibility, then the dynamic is completely different. So I would just make the argument that what we're focused on here in welfare policy, the direct objective here is women with children, and how we establish stable relationships so we can nurture children and therefore have a more stable society going forward. And I'm not suggesting that single men, heterosexual, homosexual, single women, heterosexual, homosexual, without children should get married. I mean, that's, you know, if they want to get married, if that's the time of their life they want to do, that's fine. And I'm not suggesting it's financially better or worse for them. I'm suggesting if you have a child, that you have that additional responsibility and it's additional burden. It's tough. Raising children's tough. I got 6 at home. I can tell you it's tough. That having a partner there that's a nurturer and that provides the critical role that men and women, and it's a different role. I can tell you, as a father, I provide a whole different set of values, if you will, to my children than my wife does, just from being a man and she being a woman. And so I think that's important for the nurturing of children, for the stability of them going forward, and that's why I would suggest that it's appropriate for them in those cases.
Senator has time for one more question.
Okay, yeah.
Are you saying that you don't think Americans have a right to privacy in this country? And if so, wouldn't that mean more government intervention in their lives?
Now, I would say that the right to privacy, no, I don't believe that the United States Constitution has a right, there is a right to privacy in it. I've made that statement very, very clear. It is a created right that clearly any constitutional reading is not there. It's the product of activist judges who, in some cases, maybe even in the early cases, were trying to deal with what was probably either an unwise law or an unnecessary law. and that had to do with contraception and among married couples. I've said on the floor many times, just because something is immoral doesn't mean it should be illegal. And sometimes we get carried away in this country in our attempt to do good things, to pass laws that probably are moral, but are probably either unenforceable or unnecessary. And so what happens is people who are confronted with that in the judiciary take it upon themselves to fix things before the legislature and the Congress get around to the common sense position of fixing it themselves. And in so doing, I learned in law school that bad facts make bad laws. And to me, the right to privacy is a whole series of bad facts that made bad law. And create a right to privacy which does not exist, but is focused on self, is focused on me, is focused on my rights, irrespective of anybody else's rights. Where the rest of and not for the common good. I mean, I think you could argue pretty clearly that killing the child within your womb is a hard argument to make that that's for the common good when the other person involved is being killed. And so the idea that right is consistent with the founders' vision of what constitutional rights should be about, I think just falls on very rough shoals. And so I would argue no, that the right to privacy does not exist. That does not mean that some of the issues that have been wrapped up in the right to privacy would be barred constitutionally. I mean, as everybody knows, the right to abortion was legal in many states before Roe v. Wade was passed, and my guess is had things developed according to societal trends, probably most states in the country would have some measure of legalized abortion. Maybe a few would not, but I would say most would probably have some legitimization of abortion at some level, but probably not to the level it is under Roe versus Wade, which is absolute. I mean, there's no restriction on the right to abortion practically in this country. So we tend to get away from sort of the moral center, if you will, of this country, which I think is important to do